So I'm Joel. How you doing? This is MacDevOpsYVR. Nobody else has been using this, but Matt gave me this wonderful little loop to come off stuff. It's fun if you want it in reverse, though, and you can actually just go back and forward for a little while. But so I just I like it when it comes back up. All right. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Spinny beach ball. I should have quit Slack before I got in here. So it's a great presentation. There we go. Woohoo! So far, so great. This kind of came out, some work that I've been putting together for the last couple of months. I've chatted about it a little bit, but this is the big reveal. The first time we've really been public with the whole thing. And there should be a live demo. I know I'm not supposed to do that. I know. And I have a video of it as well, if it really all goes bad. Because you do. So a few months ago, you may have been in Gothenburg at lovely Mac sysadmin. This is DevOps. Wow. Too early. So it was in Gothenburg. We were chatting about NoMAD. It was kind of like the first real big release of NoMAD. We weren't released yet, but we were in public beta. Who's using NoMAD? Get a couple of raises. Oh, very cool. Thank you. We were talking about it. It was good stuff. And as you do, obviously this is NoMAD. If you don't know what it is, it's a quick little utility to get you logged into AD and do password expiration and things like that, all right? So with that as the background, we went to the bar. We had a few beers. A gentleman from Finland came up to me and said, if I don't bind to AD anymore, how can my IT admins be admins on the local machine? And I said, well, this is really interesting. Because with NoMAD, we have a concept of casual binding, that you don't need to bind to AD. You just get your passwords, your other things, your certificates and stuff that you need from it. Leave the bind alone. Leave your users simple. Leave them easy. Protect yourself from updates to the OS that may break the AD plugin and other things. So what do? So we drank a bunch more beer. And there was not an emoji for being nerd sniped, but this is as close as I could get. And for a while after that conversation, I started, I'm too forward. I need to, all right, that's the mark. I'll keep watching the mark. And so I started thinking about this, and I said, well, all right, how do we solve this problem? How do you have directory services where there aren't directory services? How do you get people what you need, right? There's no directory services. You don't want directory services, but you need directory services. Well, so now we're in a conundrum here. We don't want that heavyweight, either LDAP, Active Directory, whatever connection going on all the time. But there's very valid reasons why you need to instantiate a user on a machine remotely. Why you need to change a password remotely. Why you need to remove a user remotely, right? All these things that just happen in a normal organization. People come, people go. You want to make that as efficient as possible. But how do you do that without a directory service? And our thought process kind of going, well, NoMAD already knows who you are because it's authenticated you against AD. All right, so now I know you've got a network persona, even though you don't have that account locally. NoMAD already knows what groups you're a member of because we can look that up in AD. So now I can hinge and pivot off of, are you an IT admin? Are you a normal user? Are you a domain admin? So we got a couple of the components already necessary. So why can't NoMAD just make you an admin? And this was kind of exciting to think about. I could look you up in AD. I could determine that you're a member of a super cool kids club. And then I could act accordingly. This whole podium moves. All right. Good to know. So then I could act accordingly and do things. The problem there, and we thought, well, this would be really great because we could do the entire process locally. All right? We could look something up on a network, and then we could do, you're cool. And then NoMAD would do some sort of privileged helper or something like that. But then the wheels started falling off pretty quickly. NoMAD can validate your Kerberos ticket, but then it'd have to do something and you'd be an admin. The problem came into this do something part. If you're not an admin, how do you become an admin? Ipso facto, you've got some problems that are being limited in there. So then we thought, well, if we could trust AD, that was a laugh line. There we go. All right. if we could trust AD, then if AD told us something, we'd have a root level agent already running on the device, and NoMAD would talk to that through some XPC, and it could be some cool stuff. Well, the problem what we've run into is it doesn't really work very well. You really need a lot more privilege separation when you're going to be doing local manipulation. We thought for a long time about how to bridge that user to root gap securely. And on the local system, we couldn't come up with anything. I have no trust that the AD domain that I'm talking to really is the AD domain that I think I'm talking to. There's no off-box authentication if we keep everything locally. And you'd have to do SUID on a binary, or you'd have to get it as a root agent. And then there's all kinds of nasty stuff that could happen. And instead of decreasing your attack surface, I would be increasing it by putting all these other bits of code on there. So with all of that, we said, there's got to be a better way of doing this. And in particular, that's Latin for who watches Active Directory or something along those lines, whatever Google Translate told me it was. There is no two-way verification with AD. And if you've heard of the evil maid problem, we started coming up with an evil AD tester problem, in that you can download a free copy of Windows, you can set up AD in a VM, and you can own an entire domain if you want to. And there'd be no way for the client machine to validate that the AD domain it was talking to was actually the AD domain it thought it was talking to. Does that make sense? And then we said, well, crap. So this kind of threw the whole local authentication out the window, and we realized that we needed something more secure. However, we weren't very interested at all in creating a whole new method of communication. I don't like writing sockets. I find web programming to be distasteful. I have no interest in any of that. So I wanted to use a facility that was already existing to be able to manipulate this. There's a few people that had kind of done this on their own. Andrina Kelly had some work about doing this through self-service. And you can have scripts that kind of elevate a GUID or a user ID, populate through self-service. But they're a little harder to do programmatically or through other existing systems, right? And I wanted something that was a little bit more robust than that. Obviously, you could BYO the entire solution, but then you're writing a server and a client. You've got all the other missing pieces in there, and it gets pretty complicated pretty quickly. And then we had the brilliant thought of why stop with just group membership? As long as we're going to be bringing directory services where there are no directory services, why don't we bring the entirety of directory services? And then we started having some really, really cool thoughts about everything that we could do. So that's a long preamble for NoMAD Helper. So let me talk about that a little bit. So if you remember back in the day, and this would be in the 10.6, 10.3 range, I'll use Michael's Ragnarok analogy. Everything came from either LDAP or AD, right? You had policy there. That's the old workgroup manager icon, right? So that's for policy. So you had policy in LDAP. You had users in LDAP. Everything lived in LDAP. It may have been AD, but AD is just another flavor of LDAP, right? But in the end, everything was there. Your Mac looked at that up. It would read the users in, and then it would read the policy in, and it would act accordingly. Somewhere in the 10.3 to 10.9 range, MDM came out, right? And at this point in time, the policy now moves away from LDAP and AD, and instead it shows up on the MDM side. So now you're putting policy through profiles, you're pushing what users can and can't do, you're pushing apps that can run, things like that, all through configuration profiles, through some form of MDM, but you still have your users in LDAP and Active Directory. So what we're doing with NoMAD Helper is we're putting all that back into MDM. And so the end result that we can now give you is a complete environment where you can manage all the users via MDM. Stunned silence. I'm hoping Apple isn't announcing the same thing. If they are, that's cool. We'll still support 10.12 and earlier, so that's good. So what NoMAD Helper is, it's a root level daemon. It's got no network access itself. All it does is look for pref key changes. And I know agents are kind of a slippery slope here as to what will or won't be allowed. The nice thing here, there's no file reading or writing. It can be fully sandboxed, and all it does is listen for pref key changes. right? So very, very minimal, and again, no network access, doesn't need it. It lets MDM do all that work. With NoMAD Helper, you can now manage 3 different types of objects. You can manage users, you can manage admin group membership, although you could do this for other groups, we just haven't gotten around to that yet. And then authentication authorities. And authentication authorities is where this really got pretty cool as we were messing around with some stuff. So this means that you can scope any one of these 3 objects to an arbitrary number of machines or not. And by removing these objects from MDM and from the scoping of a machine, NoMAD Helper will then remove that user, password, whatever else from the local machine when you remove the object. Does that make sense? Similar to what you're doing now in an MDM solution is you're scoping various configuration profiles to various groups of machines. You can now do these with these managed objects. We've allowed them to be either one single array of multiple users, so you can just have one configuration profile and push 18 accounts to your entire fleet. Or you can have the users in individual objects that you can then push individually to individual machines. The other aspect here is that the 3 objects don't always have to go together. And I'll show you in a workflow at the end. You could populate an IT admin account across your whole fleet with one configuration profile. That IT admin account does not have a password associated with it, nor is it an admin. You just have a skeleton account on every system. As you need to have elevated privileges on individual machines, you can then scope a password, or even better, a YubiKey or some sort of other token, and you can scope the admin privileges as needed just to that machine on the fly. All right? And that's just a matter of mixing configuration profiles and scoping between the machines. All this is being done by matching GUIDs, since those are a little more specific than the UIDs, and that's what the glue that keeps it all together. So as an example of this, I've got a user, I've got an auth authority, and then I've got whether I'm an admin or not. I've got a series of machines. I can scope them arbitrarily between all the different systems. So in this case, I could have the same user on the 2 machines in blue, but the authentication authority for that user, what allows them to log in, would only be applicable to the one in gold. If I wanted to, I could have a completely separate configuration profile that applied to the one on the left. All right? Very, very configurable, although with great power comes great responsibility. This is why we've been chatting with some of the MDM solutions to make this really simple to put together. Because having to do this on your own gets pretty complicated pretty quickly. And then you can make an admin user for whoever you want across all systems. So again, you're able to mix and match the scope very tightly to what exactly you need, and not everything has to be on the same machine at the same time. So this is where we do the live demo. Uh-oh, you're not supposed to see that yet. Hold on. That's only if things work. All right, so we've got a VM here that we're going to fire up. Good, do not disturb is on. Poor little MacBook. 10, 12, 4, something recent vintage Sierra is on here. And we have an running, and this is going to be the NoMAD Helper agent. This may be simpler if I do this. There you go. Whoop, let me get the actual VM over here. All right, so full VM, almost done, resuming. Almost done resuming. Come on, little MacBook. All right, cool. Now, I'll start bringing a touch bar system for demos. All right, there we go. So I'm going to run NoMAD Helper. It's running up there. It says no updates. Checking some stuff, which is good. I'm going to go over here and ID test user, no such user. All right, I'm passing the hoop over the floating assistant. I now, and since Taylor's in the audience, we're doing this via simple MDM. And I've got 3 configuration profiles that are in here and are scoped to my machine. And so if I move these around a little bit, you can see all this happening at the same time. So go over here. That's my app that's running. And I'm going to create a NoMAD Helper user. And I'm going to scroll down and hit save. And APNS is going to be overloaded. Ah! I timed out. Hold, please. All right, now, edit my group. Configurations. NoMAD Helper user. Check. Save. All right, I go over here. And if I go into System Preferences, you can see some stuff going back there. And now if I go up to Profiles, you will find that I have an additional profile, which is a NoMAD Helper user. And if you look through here, it's just a very basic skeleton user account, UID, GID, a couple of other things. And now if I go back here and I do ID on this user, I have a user account. Wow. All right, it's a fully functioning user account. If I go back to System Preferences and I smack it in the head, there it goes. Test at, well, this is actually wrong because it's not an admin, as you can see. So be careful with System Preferences because it tends to cache. Users and groups. There it goes. And now you can see that I'm a standard user. All right? So I'm going to go back to Simple MDM, and I'm going to check the box for NoMAD Helper admin, and I'm going to hit save. You'll see that this does some stuff. It may have already done it. I go back over here, and I go to Profiles, and I should now have another profile. There we go, which is the admin. And this is very simple. All it's doing is it's matching a GUID to an admin, to the admin group. And I know that GUID already because I've populated that first account with it. So now I'm just matching it up. I'm making a member of the admin. And there's 2 pieces to it. There's a GUID for doing it, and there's an expiration date. NoMAD Helper will sit and watch for when this expiration date happens. And whether you're online or not, it will remove you from the admin group at that time. All right? If you pull the configuration profile beforehand, we'll remove you from the admin group. But we'll also do it on a timed fashion. And so now if I go back up here and I do the up arrow, I'm an admin. And now I can go back into Simple MDM, and if I unscope the admin and hit save, some stuff will happen over here. There you go. You can see it going through. And if I do the up arrow, it's now thinking, and I'm no longer an admin on the account. So as long as APNS is working, you have instantaneous adjustment of users, groups, and everything else on the system. But now, so this whole demo's been going well, so that's good. So we're going to go to the part that maybe gets a little more funny. So we have an auth authority in here as well. If you're familiar with auth authorities, they're attributes associated with the user account that determine how they can sign in. You can have a Kerberos auth authority. You can have a salted hash auth authority. You can also have what we've been having a lot of fun with, which is a token ID, which comes from a YubiKey. All right? So I've got a token ID off this YubiKey. It's been put into this auth authority. I can scope it to this machine, hit save, and some stuff's going to happen here. There it goes. If you go over to System Preferences, once it refreshes itself, back to Profiles, there you go. And you can see I'm in debt, but I've ignored it. So I'm going to continue to ignore it. So this auth authority is pretty simple. All we're doing is matching a token identity to a GUID. Here's all the binary that comes through on it. And if I look at that user record, Discal, localhost, cd, local, default, users, read test user. Now I've created this auth authority in here, this token identity, which matches this YubiKey. So I was able to do this entirely without having to actually touch the box, mess around with the directory service, or do anything else. And if this works, I'm now going to be able to go up here and go to Login Window. All right. And Login Window, there we go. And I may have to move the USB token over. All right, so I go to Settings, USB and Bluetooth, connect YubiKey. There we go. And it sees the YubiKey is connected and it automatically prompts me for my PIN. And this I have not done yet, but if I put my PIN in, let me get it right. Now I'm authenticated as that user without even a password. That's kind of cool. All right, it's appropriate to clap now. So the cool workflow that we have with this is we will start provisioning IT admins with a YubiKey for local machine manipulation. So now I can send out a default IT admin account with no password associated with it and not being an admin. And then through a web page, through an MDM portal, something else like that, I can elevate that account as necessary, and I can associate it specifically to the tech that's coming up to that box. And then I get off-box logging and everything else with it. This is just a VM building the home directory. So there you see, and now shortly I should be in. But very cool. So that was the demo. And now I can sign in with my Apple ID and everything else. So back to the slides, because you've already signed into a Mac before. And my 11-year-old son said that if the demo worked, I should do this. Come on. I should do this. I should do this. There we go. And he's going to do what all the cool kids do, which is dabbing, right? I'm not incredibly familiar with that, but you get the idea. So this is NoMAD Helper. It does not have a console or anything else of its own because we expect that you would use everything through an MDM. You saw it with simple MDM. Here it is. You can do the same thing for your other favorite ones. You're just adding them in because we can actually do this with a DEP enrollment where your system will actually have the user fully instantiated when you get to the login window. Is the other cool workflow that we're using with this. So and let me actually go forward to the workflows real quick, as that will give you a good understanding of kind of how all these pieces fit together. So what we're putting together is an off-box web host of some form, where NoMAD, once it has your user password credentials, will be able to do an HTTPS post to this machine. All right, we're using your Kerberos identity so we can validate you are who you are. HTTPS, obviously for secure, goes to this web host. This web host will validate your ticket that you are the right person. It will get a JSON payload which has the serial number of the machine and the GUID of the user that you want to manipulate. All right, so that way we can do a configuration profile specifically for that machine and not have to put it out to everything. Web host takes that. Web host will then use whatever MDM API you want to go to your favorite MDM service. That will generate the configuration profiles, which will then get pushed down to the local machine. And what we'll have on NoMAD will be something like this, which is just check out an admin credential. And then it'd be entirely up to you to determine how long that credential is used for or all the other specifics behind the scenes. Again, it's also something that I don't want to create a console for, but integrate it with some of the MDM solutions is good. So one of the workflows we're exploring ourselves, you've got a new employee. When you hire that person on, something happens in an HR database, right? Well, why can't HR be your directory service? So we'll have a workflow that looks up in an asset management system. Is there a machine available for this user? If so, we'll then create a configuration profile in MDM specifically for that serial number of that machine. All right? That machine is then in DEP. That machine then gets delivered to the user. We completely suppress MacBuddy so that there's no local user creation whatsoever. All right? As part of your DEP workflow, the NoMAD Helper agent gets downloaded, it gets installed, the configuration profiles hit. In our testing, as soon as the user hits the login window, they can authenticate with the account that you created in the HR database. And now you have a computer, a machine that has just scoped one user to it. That user record is not available on any other system. If you terminate that user, you don't have to remove the user account, although you most certainly may. You can actually just change the authentication authority. And so one of the workflows we're looking at is if a user gets terminated, we change their authentication authority to one of the IT staff's YubiKeys. Now they can go in, harvest the files, whatever else they need off that system. The user themselves can't go back into that machine. Everything's nice and clean and been moved on. And then the other account is what we've been talking about before, is putting out an IT admin account, scope to all machines with no password, and it's not even an admin. And then elevation is done for each machine as necessary using tokens and passwords. We're also looking at what would be a one-shot functionality, that if you wanted to just lay the user down but not care about getting it removed. All right? Because some people get a little nervous. What if my MDM goes away? What if I make a mistake? With great power comes great responsibility. If you de-scope a configuration profile with a user object, your user won't be able to log in anymore. So just keep that in mind. So we are looking at a one-shot feature which would allow you to just lay it down and then walk away and not have to worry about what happens after that. Some other stuff that we're coming, we've got most of a Python web host to kind of show you how to do the admin elevation, putting in support for additional auth authorities as you get into some of the more involved situations. You've got some curb5, some shadow hash, and some other stuff, so we'll be able to do. The token identities were easy, and it was kind of cool for demos to be able to use that with the YubiKeys. And then account password manipulation for transitory IT staff. Right now, you can have an admin credential that expires over time. We're also looking at, could you have a password that expires over time? And that way, you could set up a password for an account, but if you forgot about it or you forgot to de-scope it or something else like that, that password would then go away after some period of time and you'd have to get it re-scoped or something else. Right now we can lay down random passwords, but we can't do anything that expires over time on the password side. So you'd have to de-scope it from there. NoMAD Helper. Questions? Exciting. Have we killed directory services? We're getting close. Thank you.
Joel, quick question if I may. You talked about a local value store in the case where the machine is offline, so the expirations could still take place. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so the nice thing about profiles is even if if you can't connect to the MDM server, the profile is still cached locally. If we got back to the admin account, you could see that in here. We'll continue on through. Skip. So we wanted to make sure, while to get an elevation event to happen, you have to be online because we've got to have that round trip through MDM and lay it back down. But as far as locally goes, you still have that profile there. So until we phone back home to MDM and it tells us it's been removed, it'll still be there and we'll still act accordingly with it. So that's why we had that expiration time. You could go online to become an admin, but that expiration time would still be stashed in that profile. And NoMAD Helper, once it hits that time, will de-elevate the user. Does that make sense? Answer your question? Other questions?
All further questions during the coffee break.
There you go, because we're running out of time. So thank you very much.
Round of applause for Joel.